What a strong morning start. Hello, everybody. Thank you, John and Lori, for some amazing tunes so far, and Bonnie for opening the circle. That was really powerful. And welcome, everyone. Today I'm in front of my family wall because that's part of our discussion. It's actually our theme today. We went through for the past few months, if you're just joining us, we did a study of the chakra system. And so that has helped us focus inward and do some healing of, where we're storing things and where we need to shift things in order to live a more sacred life. And now we're moving outward as we explore the relationships in relation to our spiritual development. And so last week, we kind of discovered and explored friendship, how we can shift friendships from codependency to having a more sacred center in our lives, and how, friendships are chosen. And that's a little bit different than family. And so today we're going to focus more on family. Family can either be the rock that's our foundation, or it can be the rock that we kind of butt up against and shape ourselves against. So we'll explore a little bit about which one it serves you, maybe both. But in order to get started, Bonnie already opened our circle for us. Let's just go ahead and breathe into this space. Feel ourselves sitting, standing, being wherever we are, whether we're joining right now in this moment with us live, or if you're joining with us later, the powers that be are still joining us. Opening the circle, calling in the ancestors, big part of our family talk today. Calling in our guides. Calling in our highest selves. Family can be something that really brings a lot of elation. It can also be something that can really trigger a lot of suffering. So let's bring our highest selves to this right now, so that we're able to shift ourselves to where we need to be in the highest good for ourselves and for all. And just breathe into that space for a moment. And open your eyes and come in. So Nietzsche said, in family life, love is the oil that eases friction. The oil that eases friction. The cement that binds us closer together, and the music that brings harmony. Friedrich Nietzsche said that. Family, when we come into the world, our first experience, whatever that is, to be held, to be taken away. But when we come into the world and we're birthed, we come in, and family's the thing that gives us safety, acceptance, a sense of what unconditional love is, connection, okay, protection. All of these things are associated with family. And how we experience those based on the family that we come into sets up who we become. Okay, so it's going to be imperfect no matter what. None of us can be perfect, but it helps us prepare for life depending on how we handle those imperfections. And so again, we're going back into this place of safety, acceptance, unconditional love, connection, and protection. So our relationship with those feelings and where we are on those spectrums sets us up for our relationship with family as a whole, in addition to the individual relationships we have, okay? But as a whole, our families. It can be tricky because while family isn't chosen like friends, okay, like partners, where we get to choose, we have a conscientious free will into that. Our higher selves, we believe, a lot of us believe, we do come in choosing who our family is. I'm adopted personally, and while I know I came in through a particular birth mother, soulfully, energetically, I knew where I was going to end up. And I ended up with the family that I was coming into. And that's who I was raised with and raised by. So explore that idea a little bit for yourselves. But today, we have this diversity out there where we can have adoptions. We have so many more step families. Families are so much more extended. You have so many different grandparents sometimes. As well as the loss of grandparents. We have more single family homes. We have chosen family members where if you're alone, you have a lot of the adopted aunties and uncles about. But when somebody is actually, designated as family, that is different than friendship. Whether it's by blood or not, that is different than friendship. And so we do all create the tribe we need around us as family. And we're going to get into that a little bit more and figure out how this is created, because a lot of us don't empower ourselves to recognize that choice. A lot of us feel our families imposed upon us, especially if we have some sort of history with abuse or difficult relationships. This happened to us. And today I want to shift that a little bit, because when we empower ourselves to recognize where our choices are, and we let go of our egos, we're able to step into a more sacred relationship in understanding our families. So whether your family is painful, your relationships are painful, challenging, supportive, and the most influential things in your life, they're emotional bonds, and that's what makes them so strong. It doesn't matter if it's a good feeling or a negative feeling, if it's a challenge or a source of great joy. That all happens because family is emotional bonding. That is where it's the environment that we're growing into and growing up in. It's all emotionally based, and that's why it has such strong connection to us, good or bad, okay? And that influence us both inwardly in who we become and who we are today, as well as outwardly in the way that we have other relationships, in the way that we live our life today, in the rituals, in the characteristics of us, in our skill set, in all the other relationships that unfold in our life. All of it greatly, greatly, greatly influenced by our relationship with family. And so in some regard, you can see the connection between yourself and, most importantly, your parent or parents. And it is actually parents, even if you didn't know one. Your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and your ancestors, your ancestry. You inherit so much that we're not even conscious of sometimes. And so digging into that a little bit helps us understand ourselves better, helps us filter what's serving our highest good and what isn't. And so one of the most important things to look at there are, what are the family values, okay, that create your moral compass, that created it starting in the very beginning and has molded you all this time. So when we talk about family values, we're talking about inward, what's inside of us, what's in our hearts, what's in our heads, where our internal compass was developed. And anything outside of us is more family culture. Okay, that's the outward, the environment that we grew up in, what our dinners looked like, what our communication was, and how we live outside of ourselves. That's more of our family culture. But the family value stuff is on the inside. So consciously being able to see the difference between those can help us sometimes separate and understand how we can grow and change and heal things, how we can even embrace and have gratitude for our values that are instilled in us, and how we pass those along to the next generation. So sometimes we want to pass along the value without the cultural piece. Sometimes we want to pass along the opposite, maybe we want to pass along having family dinner every night, but we don't necessarily want to pass along the values of what was included in those conversations if it was negative or degrading. So separating the values from the culture can be important for the way we understand how our families have affected us. So when we teach our children, whether they're your own children, whether they're your grandchildren, whether they're somebody else's children, between, what's right, what's wrong, we're helping them develop their own moral compass that's going to affect them long after we're here, most likely. So when we're looking at how we teach others and how we speak to them, we want to think about that internal compass. We can also think about the cultural pieces, but that compass is what we're helping them shape. And when we think about that responsibility, when we think about that honor, it's such a place of respect to be able to have an influence over a young person and the way that they think and the way that they make choices that will carry them into the future. So it's interesting because we can sit and think about where we've come from and who we are and what challenges we have. And we did that a lot with the chakra system. And now we also want to think about how my own compass, how my behaviors, how my culture and my values affect my family around me. And so we kind of start to look at, ooh, that makes me dig in a little bit more. So specific to your family, and this can vary, household to household, as well as different societies and even different time periods. What our family values are today are different than what they were 100 years ago, based on what our culture is around us. What your family values are in America are going to possibly be different than what family values are in India, per se, in China. So stop and just think for a moment about what values you have in your family as a whole, what was handed down to you, what's been changed, what you've passed along, and where that came from. How that was given to you by your ancestors and what affected it, the time period, the culture around you, what country you're in. It's interesting to let that bubble up, because when it's all said and done, we can say there's a value of life, there's a value of love, and where we find those threads that surpass time, surpass different cultures, surpass all of that, we find the thread of what makes us all human. That's where we have the human family. And then we can dig in and understand better how individuals come together for this. So, family can be so diverse in all these different ways, and we create the tribe that we need. Understanding a little bit more about how that's happened and having the time and space to reflect on it today helps us develop where we're going and how we live and make those choices and reflections in a more sacred way. So it's a place where we can heal our story rather than ignore it or hide it if it's painful. It's a place we can celebrate our story if it's a place that brings us joy. And most importantly, we can think about how we want to pass it on, how we want to create our own legacy, how we want to be a part of the heritage story of our own family. So when we go back into Nietzsche's quote, think about it with these reflections a little bit. In family life, love is the oil that eases friction. Where has there been friction in your family? Which relationships have friction? And has love been applied there yet? In family life, love is the cement that binds us closer together. Those that you are closest to, why are you closest to them? What's that love like? What does it look like today? Where did it come from when you were young? Can you identify what that looked like and how love manifested itself for you? See, we're digging deep. Love isn't this surface word that we hear everywhere. We're putting depth to it. We're putting meaning to it. We're understanding it better because it's the tool that we need to use where we have problems, where we're rubbing up against that rock. In family life, love is the music that brings harmony. So where are things disharmonious? Where is the melody not coming through? Where are we all on different scales and different notes and we're not, coming together in a harmonious way? Can you see where there's a lack of love there? Where love might be, at the lowest tone, and what's higher is the fear, the discord, the anger, or the hurt. It may not be yours, it may be the other person's. Just kind of feel how the lack of love there is what's bringing the disharmony. And so when we put love in, it is the oil that can ease the friction, the cement that brings us closer, and the music that brings us harmony. I just love that quote because it's poetic, of course, but it's also very encompassing. It's very encompassing, where we need ease, where we need to come together, and where we need to bond. All of those things are love. And again, it's not the surface word. What is it inside of you? That is living a sacred life. Tapping in to love. And where does that come from? It's a gift through our divine connection. It's limitless. It's a well you can tap and let flow. But that flow gets affected by so many things. That flow is your natural state of being. So if we can kind of remove some of those obstacles, we have to become conscientious in order to remove those obstacles. So if that's not your experience of having that flow, of having that ease, then you look at what if your family has had a lot of friction. Sometimes that's not easy to look at. It's going to open old wounds. It's going to be hard. What's really challenging sometimes is the fact that it's about other people that we can't control, right? We can't control other people. We can't make them see this differently. And so when there's pain, disdain, lack of love, lack of harmony, all of these things, we can only control ourselves. We can only affect our side of the equation. But our side of the equation is the part we're responsible for. It's a very important part. Khalil Gibran said, between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, most of love is lost. So between what is said and not meant, and what is meant and not said, between those, most of love is lost. And so communication is a big key to relationships because we have another person here. We have another person here. And regardless of where the conflict may have happened or where the falling out was, we can only control ourselves. We get that eagle's eye view. Today, we're going to withdraw a little bit from the situation while holding it in our heart and looking into it with new eyes, with an observer's eyes, with your observer, that's your higher self. So we can really see, how do we bring harmony here? Sri Chinmoy says, your heart must become a sea of love. Your mind must become a river of detachment. And that's that getting into that observer's place, detaching a little bit from the initial emotion. I don't feel like I'm wasting time on this for you. I don't feel like the majority of people sitting out there is like, hey, my family's all good. We've all got this down. We're harmonious and everything else, because we're all flawed. And if this doesn't apply to you now, you can relate to it because it's applied in the past. And it will happen again because everything changes. And if nothing else, seed it deeper. Seed your gratitude so deep that you are blessed without conflict in family. And that family is that solid foundation, that stone that you've built on. It's amazing and beautiful. And so this is what you offer. You offer your gratitude, your deep gratitude for having that, because it is rare. It's hard. It's hard to have a lot of successful relationships in family. And they can all be successful, but it doesn't mean they're without challenge, right? So it's not easy. And even being not easy, you are very capable and you are very worthy of positive, healthy relationships. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to sound the way you want it to. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be, served on a silver platter. But it does mean that it challenges you to grow. It does mean that it gives you a sense of support, a sense of security, a sense of acceptance, and that you also have the opportunity to give that to somebody, that you can help somebody you love feel unconditionally loved, feel supported, accepted, worthy of love. This is what we give. So let's get into our own stories a little bit. We're going to have some contemplative reflection here, okay? So close your eyes. And in your breath and in your mind's eye, explore yourself a little bit here. Who were you? Who are you? What was your experience? What is your experience as a child? Awaken what your internal observer needs to see differently in order to heal something. We're just going to ask very gently for that higher self of yours, that place that's behind your eyes, that can see everything, that brings wisdom through our third eye chakra, that brings heart space and can just simply see. And all you need to see is where something needs to possibly heal. Okay, so who were you as a child in relationship to your parents? Start there. That's the most important relationship of family, is you as a child with your parents. It's the center of who you become. But don't miss that that's also connected to your grandparents. Did you have a relationship with your grandparents? Any of them? Was it a good one? What was the quality of it? What can you see in yourself, good, bad, or otherwise, that directly came from your grandparents? That directly came from your parents? The good, the bad, and the ugly. What did you inherit? And recognize now in your mind's eye that that was stored in your karmic cellular material. That so much of that was simply what the generations before you were blessed in passing on and were unable to heal before they passed on. So we inherit this, mixed bag of things. But we are blessed with living in a time of awareness and consciousness. And so we are the ones called forward now to do a lot of that healing. And believe it or not, I believe we signed up for it, that we came here knowing this is what we're going to do. We live during such a blessed time of having awakening and consciousness and spiritual paths to seek out and to explore. So here we are, and there is no mistake to it. So really look in your heart. Who were you as a child? What do you still see here that matters? Who were you as a sibling, if you were one? If you weren't, did you have somebody else close in your life you considered like a sibling? How did that affect who you are? What about as a niece, a nephew, a cousin? You look at all of those relationships and you explore who you were. and what your experience was, without judgment, without opinion, from that observer's point of view. And if you suffered some sort of abuse or some sort of deep traumatic negative experience, this is sometimes hard to look at. But within looking at it is where the healing can happen. And disclaimer, if you did suffer some sort of great trauma or abuse, and you haven't yet sought professional help to get through that, that may be important. That may be something coming up for you now, if this is what you're listening to. And so now we hold that and we shift to our adulthood. So who are you today, still connected to your childhood, based on your experience? What have you brought forward that's still with you? How have you shifted good, bad, indifferent experiences from when you were young to today? And how do you offer the wisdom from that to the future generations, to your family you have today? How did your experience as a child form what kind of parent you would be, or an aunt, or an uncle? What kind of grandparent you are, maybe a godparent? How are you affecting the legacy and the heritage of your family? I want to dig in a little bit to where some of the snags in these relationships come, especially in adulthood. As we move into adulthood, especially with siblings, right? We're all planted, the tree grows, and then as we branch, we go in different directions. And oftentimes, depending on how we grew, siblings are where bullying starts. Most parents can take all the time in the world to try to, teach their siblings how to get along, how to love each other. And yet it's an innate thing. We go all the way back to Cain and Abel. There's this innate, pushing against each other that happens. At the same time, that love can happen too. Okay, so it's kind of how we branch away from each other. And we become our own individuals. You see this with twins a lot. Twins struggle to figure out their own individual identity from each other. Siblings do also. Sometimes in adulthood, sibling relationships fall apart. Sometimes they become best friends and they become closer. And the larger the family, the more variety there is. Isn't it interesting how you can raise the same kids in the same home with the same environment and culture, the same values coming from the parents, and they can be so incredibly different. We all have our own walk, and we're all working through some of the same cellular karma, but we're working through it in different ways based on how individualistic we can be. So that sibling relationship really takes, if it's in conflict, if there's not harmony there, really takes a lot of concentration to take a step back, to observe, and to drop all judgment, to really go into the 4 agreements there, to drop judgment, to drop expectation. And it's so hard because we've had a lifetime. We take on our parents' expectations of our siblings for them, and it's not our place to. We take on judgment of our siblings on behalf of the world, and it's not our place to. The unconditional love piece that we come into the world to get from our family happens easily, typically, with parents and children. Does not happen as easily with siblings. And this is a piece where the love is the oil that needs to be brought. The unconditional love. Stepping forth and recognizing that there doesn't have to be expectation. There doesn't have to be judgment. That we're able to actually drop all that. That's our stuff. That's inside of here. Drop it all. Step forward and offer that to your brother or sister. Offer to them that which they need from their family. And you're that person who can give it to them because you are awakened and you are conscious and you are on a sacred path. And you can bring that and you can offer that love, not that love that's the surface stuff. Oh, I love you. It's Christmas. Mm-mm. That deeper love, the deeper acceptance, the deeper stability without an opinion. That's the gift you can give to family. Parent-child relationships, different dynamics, right? Whether it's estranged, whether it's close, it still has its own challenges. And so we step into that space. We step into that space. I love, as a parent myself, one of the writings I've always attached to, obviously, Khalil Gibran is a huge influence, especially I love his take on relationships. And so The Prophet is a book that I've been leaning into for the series. But I leaned into his writing on children when I became a mother. And one of the things he says that I've always attached to is, you are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. You are the bows from which your children are living arrows sent forth. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. I had that on a different screen. I wasn't even necessarily planning to pull that up. But the point is that, with our children, oftentimes what gets all snaggy and jagged in there is we become really solid in the way that we are. And we become the rock they break themselves against instead of the rock that lifts them. We are not meant to tell them how to think. We are meant to give them the tools to figure it out for themselves. We will be gone one day, and they will just be left with the values and the heritage that we give them. What do we want that legacy to be? It's hard. It's hard. We pour our hearts and souls into our children, and then they fly away. The nest, they don't stay in that nest very long, but they weren't ours in the first place. They chose us. We have karma to work out together, and then they move on. One of the ways I like to think about parenting when I see clients that are having that kind of, relationship, and I do it too. I mean, I have a teenager, so of course we're going to have conflict. It's the part that we're supposed to have conflict in. But the thing of it is that when you, in all of these relationships, when you can be aware, alert, and awakened enough, consciously, mindfully, if you can be awakened enough to recognize what the other person needs. And it really comes down to that love piece without judgment, as unconditional as you're capable of being. When you can offer that, it heals all things. It heals all things when you drop your judgment, when you drop your own expectations, when you can recognize what another person needs and you can offer the best you have to give, whatever that looks like. That's what they need. So when it comes to parenting, think of what parent does this child need right now? I don't care if the child's 40 years old, they're still your child. What kind of a parent do they need right now? What's in their highest good? I guarantee you it's what's in yours also. Not what do I need right now? Not, I'm going to be this kind of a parent because this is what happened to me. This is where we transform. This is where we take what our experience was, okay, what we're carrying with us, this karmic cellular stuff. This is what we were given. And when we can turn and just allow it to be the oil, the fuel that burns off, and what we give out is what's needed, is the balm, the love. That's where we heal. This is the transition. It doesn't have to be a whole lot of taking things apart in our head. It really just comes down to offering ourselves in the highest good for another. So explore how you've developed the nature of your relationships. Think about the communication you have. Are you an active listener? What statements do you use? I versus you. Can you use nonviolent, non-threatening types of language? Do you share feelings? What's your emotional intelligence level? These are all places we grow. We grow where we don't know yet. We can grow. We can learn. We can learn at 100 years old. How do we handle conflict? Can we find a way that everything we know about family, even if challenging, can become the rock underneath us to give us support? Or are we creating a rock of it that we gnash ourselves against? Can we identify what our blessings are, what our wounds are? Love can open the door to greater understanding, just as understanding can open the door to greater love. Okay? So see how these may be a reflection for you. Allow the cellular karma to show itself. Recognize how you can transform it. Explore who you are because of your family, in spite of your family. See what that story is. See what healing needs to be done still. That story never really ends because it carries on. What part do you play in the story? Where can you drop your story? Where does that not have to matter anymore to the ego? You aren't done. You're still here. You're not done. No matter how old you are, no matter how old your kids are, no matter if you didn't have kids, you're not done healing family stuff, or you'd be gone. So there's something still to explore. There's a way you can let your family story still enhance you, let you heal, become an even better person in all of your relationships. Becoming what you're missing, whatever the empty spaces are, okay, they illuminate the opportunity you still have to fill yourself. And when you do that, you give permission to others to do that for themselves as well. That's important. Awakening happens when we take on that full responsibility for ourselves, for our lives, for everything that's happening. Even for the abuse and trauma, we're not taking on the responsibility, that's somebody else that did it, but we're taking on the responsibility of knowing that we can transform it, that we don't have to stay wounded, that we don't have to feel broken, that we can transform that. Especially, with our thoughts and our opinions about everything that's happening. That's vital. We choose our thoughts about what's happened to us. So we create through our thoughts the life that we have, how it feels to us. This is how we can turn to living sacred. We can choose the thoughts that are about love, that are about sacredness, that are about how we make every difficult rock that we've broken ourselves against into something that lifts us. Okay? So while family relationships influence our hearts and our minds, and even our character and our behaviors, okay? And even our spirits at times. Sometimes we feel broken spirited. They do not affect our souls. Relationships do not affect our souls. Our souls are here with a purpose, with a reason. That is the part of you that is divinely connected. And nothing can touch that. That is the place that you source yourself from. That is the place where your love flows from as well. So this is what we are connected to through our source. This is where we heal from in our soul. Okay. We're going to do a short meditation with this. So go into that soul body that I'm talking about. Breathe into your soul body. Consider what you were taught to care about. What family values are important to you? Is that something that you still need to hold on to? Is it something that still resonates? Is it something that still serves your highest good? If not, consciously let it fall away and invite in the values that lift your higher spirit, that serve your highest good. Any thoughts, feelings, values, behaviors that no longer serve your highest good, just with your exhale, invite them to fall away easily. Consider what family relationships do support you. And right now in your heart space, just send lots of gratitude to those relationships. Send them blessings. And consider what relationships in your family need healing. And repeat in your mind, give me the strength and higher view to see what this needs, the gifts it offers, and how to initiate that to happen. Now with your next breath in, pull in divine grace, invite in divine grace. Allow it to stream through your 7th chakra. And the beauty about divine grace is that it brings the superpower of forgiveness with it. Grace is a perfect state of forgiveness and love all in one space. So ask for that divine intervention to reflect that to others, to bring it in for yourself and then reflect it out to others, bypassing any egoic hooks that you might have right now. Just beaming it out as you fill yourself with it and give it to others. This is a beautiful space to use the Ho'oponopono prayer, the Hawaiian Indian prayer. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. Thank you. And that's this beautiful prayer you use for yourself and you use for your family. And when you're using it for your family, it can be coming from you, but it's also coming through you. Because people who have hurt you, it's not personal. It's usually never about you. And so on behalf of whatever it is that did hurt them, on behalf of whatever it is that caused the trauma, the root of that evil, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you, thank you. Invite in and ask your ancestors for the deepest sacred wisdom for all of your relationships. Hold that in your mind space right now as I smudge. Into the smoke, I release all energies that do not serve me, all negativity that surrounds me, and all fear that limits me. Aho. Ah, beautiful. Beautiful. So let's close with a blessing. Any intentions you might have, please offer them now Hold them in your heart. Say them aloud if you'd like. And we're going to dedicate our time together and our efforts to all those who are stuck in the samsara of family relationships, stuck in patterns of any form of abuse from others or themselves, stuck without grace, stuck without forgiveness. May they be awakened to the sacred power of healing in their lives. In the words of my Cherokee ancestors, "Oh, great spirit that made all races, look kindly at the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which separates us from our brothers. Grant us your grace to embrace all our family in the sacred circle with warm hugs, an open heart, and a free spirit. For we are all walking the road the best we know how." Aho.